organisations. So this is for me has been like one of the sessions that's been a long time coming. I think a lot of people have been struggling with online training, and I hate the term e-learning, but we'll probably use it throughout today because people know what it means, and that's fine. But yeah, sticking e in front of something just because it's online is probably not acceptable in 2020. So that's maybe something to think about when you're marketing your online training courses. But I think what we've seen a lot of is people reacting really quickly, which has been really good. I guess that danger of taking the way that you've been running sessions in a face-to-face setting and then just sticking a webcam in front of it and then putting it on Zoom, and actually thinking about how are people using digital in really interesting ways to really get online learning to a new level. And to thinking about, I guess one of the things that's been a real eye-opener for me is the potential to engage people who wouldn't engage in a face-to-face learning setting, and where digital can offer that opportunity for people. So we're going to hear from, we've got 4 speakers from 3 different organisations today. So we've got the Open University, the Charity Learning Consortium and Lead Scotland. And they're going to be talking about both transitioning existing training onto online, but also how you can develop training digitally from scratch and what that might look like. And we'll be talking about a range of tools and platforms and strategies today. So we won't just be talking about how do you put a training session in front of Zoom, but actually how might self-led training and learning look like for your organisation. So I'm really excited about today. It's got some good speakers. So the first person up is Emma Whitelock from Lead Scotland. And they've been doing some really interesting stuff in this space, and again just pivoted really quickly in terms of providing support to people. So I'll hand you over to Emma just now.
That's great. Thanks very much, Ross. So thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm the Chief Exec at Lead Scotland, Linking Education and Disability. We support disabled people and carers by providing learning, befriending and helpline services across Scotland. Adults aged 16 plus, no upper age limit. We've got about 20 staff, 150 volunteers. Last year we supported around 1,000 people with direct services, just to give you a flavour of us. It was exactly 6 months today that we paused face-to-face operations and did an overnight pivot to remote-only services. For us, a massive change, like many of you. Our frontline services, learning services, have been 100% face-to-face. Almost all were one-to-one. Over half the services had at least 1 or more visits in learners' own home. 2/3 of the learners who actually took up services with us wanted to develop their digital skills. So we've got a computer home loan team. So we knew that many learners wouldn't be online, wouldn't have the kit or data, and wouldn't have the confidence to get started. So you'll recognise that kind of challenge. 3 things we did simultaneously and 3 lessons we learned. So one of the things we did was reached out and listened to the people we support. Workers already had one-to-one relationships with individuals, so they started phoning people to explain, we're now remotely online to keep people safe, what do you need? As you'd expect, everybody wanted something different, a different pace, was familiar with a different kind of platform, had different support needs, needed learning opportunities at different levels of difficulty, some non-formal, some looking for a qualification. So we knew our strategy for online learning was not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. The staff and volunteers had to engage with a range of platform and apps and a different way of thinking. If you're familiar with the Scottish Credit and Qualification Framework, the majority of learners we were supporting were at SCQF level 2 to 4. And at that level, learning has to use contexts which are familiar, not abstract concepts. New digital spaces can be difficult to conceptualise. So that was another way for which we thought we're going to have to use familiar spaces on an individual level. Staff took the lead in creating a new section in our operations manual about the safe use of different platforms, striving for a consistent approach. Because when you're person-centred, it can quite easily look like a rammy, and everybody's really getting quite confused quite easily. So we tried to get some consistency, bring people together. So we had weekly webinars with staff to share what's working and what are we going to keep going, what are we parking, try different things. Importantly, some learners also said they wanted or needed to pause learning, but they wanted to stay in touch and engage with us because they were feeling isolated, lonely, or they were just anxious about the pandemic and didn't have the headspace to learn. So we successfully applied for some emergency government funding for 6 months to extend their befriending services, which had previously just been in Fife, right across Scotland. So that was useful to keep some people. And in fact, through that, we actually engaged some people who then became learning, or they went back into learning because we had the relationship. Number 2, we sense checked our strategy and annual plan tactics. was our newly launched 3-year strategy, developed pre-COVID, now fit for purpose. Our ambition was to double the number of learners we could reach. What would have to change to deliver everything remotely for an indefinite period? So we adjusted some tactics. Obviously this is brief, so one example is we engaged a sessional staff member who could help us reach across our usual geographic boundaries and offer some one-off free learning opportunities for learners, volunteers and staff across Scotland who already had the confidence to engage that way, of course. So we've reached an additional 200 people, averaging about 10 at each session. So still nice, quite small groups, but we've been able to do something a different way. Number 3, we took up even more opportunities to work with partners to deliver online learning. One of the first things we did was curate a page of other people's free online learning offers. We had to work generously together in a usually competitive space. We formed new strategic and operational cross-sector partnerships. So a couple of examples. Before COVID, we teamed up with the OU, good to see them here, with some funding from SCVO to support disabled people to write a course for disabled people, which was about being a beginner in an online space. That takes a while to get started, but it's been great. So being hosted in the Open Learn Create site means it's a freely available resource for anyone who wants to learn. And further to its recent launch, co-production is not a quick process. We're delighted the first 48 learners can sign up, or are signed up already and learning. Now any of you can tap into that as well. We're holding webinars now for partners to be able, so that they can support people to go through that bit of learning. So there's a free resource that you can just get in and use, and learners get a digital badge. Please spread the word. Another example of partnership, our Fife Learning Coordinator worked with a retirement housing officer to support 6 people who were shielding, offering befriending support or remote support with digital learning. So, you know, the retirement community are there, but the housing association staff didn't know where to get started. So working together, we can do that. Final wee example on that, we're an SQA centre. So we worked with the Moray Wellbeing Hub, and we offered accreditation routes for their members. So the members were supported to stay resilient with their mental health, and they were gaining a qualification at the same time through the pandemic. So that's 3 things we did. Listen to people, sense check our strategy and direction, working more in partnership. 3 lessons we learned. It was incredibly useful to listen and talk to the people we support. It informed our strategy for online learning, and we stayed true to ourselves by offering a person-centred service. Having ultimate flexibility to meet learners in an online space they're familiar with was key. We didn't impose a single way of engaging or a single platform. We delivered by telephone, text, email, VC, one-to-one, video conference, group, Facebook, WhatsApp. We really did it so many different ways, even post with phone support. Now our team were already used to offering a personalised approach, so they were well on the way to being digitally agile. We'd spent 2 years before, we weren't starting from scratch. We'd spent 2 years beforehand improving our in-house team digital capability, not in online spaces, because people weren't asking us for online learning. They wanted face-to-face, but they had a good grounding. We use Microsoft 365 apps, training in cyber resilience, and we had cyber essentials. We had a firm footing from which to pivot with some confidence that it was within us to respond. We'd also received some capital funding to buy new computers and phones, so that came in rather helpful, although the prices went like that. But the impact of being flexible means we engaged all but a very few learners, and in fact we reached many more people than we would have done in the first 6 months of the year. One staff member noted with hindsight in a survey this week, well, lead ethos and delivery model lends itself to any and all methods of delivery, which I thought, that's a casual sentence, but it kind of gave me hope that people felt that it wasn't a square peg in a round hole. Number 2, we learned we had a strategic plan which was focused enough to allow performance monitoring, broad enough for us to change the way we deliver our services to achieve our ambition. There was a lot of things out with our control when lockdown struck, as you'll all have noticed, so we focused on the things we could control. We had a team committed to a shared ambition and who embraced the freedom to identify and deploy whatever online resources are required to meet learner demand and need. Change is still difficult and it has been overwhelming at times for people, but our organisational culture has kept us afloat, and in some ways, for a disparate team like us, being remote brought people closer together, they said. So that's heartening for me. Taking a strategic view enabled us to make smarter financial decisions about online learning too. So far, the personalised solutions I'm telling you about had incurred no extra costs apart from a Zoom account. After a cost-benefit analysis, we started to move some volunteer training resources into Moodle Cloud to create a more dynamic learning experience. Initially, we'd hosted those resources as documents in password-protected areas of OneDrive, offering Zoom sessions to go through it like a kind of handbook. But that is quite old school, and we thought, let's get something a bit more dynamic, and it's difficult to get people together for Zoom, although not today, you've done very well on that. But generally, so we thought this gives people flexibility at the time they want. Lastly, 3, engaging with partner organisations improved their reach and improved the experience for learners, and learners tell us that. So we teamed up with the Scottish Government, YouthLink and WEA as a partner, helping to distribute £250,000 worth of kit, including adaptive assistive technology through the Digital Inclusion Fund for community-based learners. That's a great strategic partnership, and we're ready to respond with support to learn how to use it. Another example is if 2 organisations are supporting the same learner, then we've ensured we both use the same tools that the learner's comfortable with. So both delivery organisations using, for example, Google Docs as a document repository, or both using Zoom for video conferencing, or both organisations aligning schedules to avoid overburdening learners with online commitments. Having an idea of the environment that a learner is transitioning into after we've worked with them is vital, so we can provide some guidance ahead of the individual completing the work with us. So 3 lessons then: listen to people, keep getting feedback and keep adapting, try and stay strategic and an eye on your organisational culture, and we worked more effectively in partnership. I hope that gives you a flavour of what we've been up to. Happy to take any questions later.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Emma. There's some questions coming in the chat. We'll pick those up though once we've heard from all the speakers. Some really good ones. Beth making a good point there about just, I guess, that really simple principle of going to where people are comfortable already. And actually, I guess all of you thinking about what that's going to look like for you and having these conversations with your learners and your partners first before you embark on thinking about the platform you're going to use, because too much of this stuff happens behind closed doors and then it's kind of launched to people and people are like, I don't want that thing. I'm not comfortable with this. So it's like, how are you going to co-design this? What does this look like? And not just with learners, but with partner organisations as well. Some really, really useful stuff in there, Emma. Thank you. Okay. We're going to move on to our next speaker. So our next speaker is Martin Baker from the Charity Learning Consortium. Martin has the best desk set up in the world, which you'll see in a second behind him. So I'll hand over to Martin just now. He also has the best bookcase in the world as well. So.
Thanks, Ross. My name's Martin Baker, and I run the Charity Learning Consortium. Obviously, the first thing is you need to show everybody my bookshelf and my exercise thing, and I don't know if you can see the dog on the sofa as well. And it's great how what lockdown and what COVID has done is it's really helped break down a lot of those digital barriers. And we've been working with charities who, before lockdown, had an 18 and a 24-month digital transformation strategy. Suddenly within 2 weeks of lockdown, everything had happened, and we saw that in terms of usage of online learning. Where I'd like to just start is, what is online learning? What is e-learning? What is digital learning? What is computer-based training? There are all these terms, and can I just ask you very quickly in the chat box, just put down what you think online learning is, because we as an organisation divide it into 4 or 5 different sections. But if you just put that into the chat box, just so we start to get a feel, and then I can pull some of those out, and then I can sort of break down what different areas we put that into. E-learning has been around with us as a term for 8 or 9 years, I suppose. Before that, we used to call it computer-based learning or computer-based training. So learning from a screen, ability to learn at my own pace, topic facilitated made easier by technology, accessing using IT, learning via internet, online courses, different level. Okay, so that's that from a top level. Learning using online platforms, remote computer-based learning. I'd like to divide it up into maybe 4 or 5 different sections. And so first of all, we talk about online, off-the-shelf, generic
delivery, although sometimes it is.
Thank you. So online, off the shelf learning. So it can cover a whole host of different skills, and it might be compliance. And we see that a lot of our members are using off the shelf for compliance, or introduction to coaching or coaching skills, or running appraisals. And the real benefit of that is essentially cost. Essentially, when we're looking at one of the major benefits of using online learning is cost per head can be brought right down. We get that gets thrown back in our faces sometimes in terms of saying, well, if it's cheap, it's not good. But then when you look at some of the benefits of, when you create a piece of e-learning, you can create it at such a level so your standard is then consistent. Everybody that is then accessing that content is at that consistent level, and they can do it in their own time and those benefits. And so off the shelf plays quite a major part. Off the shelf within the corporate space is massively expensive, and that's one of the problems that we face within our sector. When we started as a consortium, it was a bit of a crazy idea, really. It was, if we could get 10 charities to group together to pay and share the cost of the corporate license, it would become affordable. And it took us probably 5 or 6 years to get actually 6 charities who were prepared to be part of a pilot group. And so we ran the pilot with 6. We built a very basic Moodle platform, some off-the-shelf content, and then once a quarter we would all get together to share experience, best practice, positive stuff, negative stuff. I tried this and it's great. I tried this and it was rubbish. And the two absolute drivers about working as a group, and we've now got over 200 members, is number one is cost. How do we keep costs down to an absolute minimum? And so we've got, there's different breakpoints in terms of how big you are as an organisation, through to there's a lot of content that we push out for free. And if an organisation can't afford it, then they tend to get it for free. This whole idea of coming together. If I've created something, I want to share it. So if a charity over here has created something, I'll share it with the charity over here. So that's off the shelf. The second is bespoke. Bespoke is expensive. If you bring people from, if you use outside organisations to create bespoke, it costs you a lot of money. So what we tend to look at is, if you can satisfy 80% of the need with an off the shelf, use that, and then that means it drives down the cost of your bespoke. And we've been doing this for a long time, and suddenly what we're finding now, and certainly through COVID, people are talking about blended learning a lot. We've been doing blended learning ever since we were born, but it's become it's really been highlighted now within COVID. It's great. So some of those face-to-face courses, now how can we take down the face-to-face level and then create a online version? And this is where we then come into the third thing that we would call online. So we've got generic, bespoke, and then web-based. And I'm not really sure what we call it. We talk about webinars, and we talk about virtual classrooms. And so this I suppose this is a webinar. We've got people who are sharing knowledge and expertise. And then a virtual classroom would be a smaller number of people, and it's where you then you're able to put people into breakout rooms and work together as groups. And when we look at our members, they all use generic. Some of them use bespoke, and bespoke either that they brought in an organisation to build it, or they built it themselves. And there are lots of authoring tools out there that make it possible for you to create your own content. I suppose one word of warning is, an authoring tool can enable somebody with no real experience to create some really rubbish e-learning. And that's what we have to remember. And what's happened over COVID is lots of organisations have said we've got to go online. So they take the PowerPoint that's been used in the face-to-face course, and they put a voiceover to it, and they send it out to people and say, this is now your online course. It's rubbish. I really, what we really need to do is we need to start looking at how we can create something, how we can create something to help you create, something that that will work. It's a bit of a I can get on my soapbox a bit about that. Lots of tools available, and so some of the sessions that we run are around how do you create effective e-learning. And then I suppose the last two areas is audio and video. So podcasts, we're all using podcasts. Actually, podcast is something that it's probably not something that we're using within the work environment. It's more something that we're using within our, on our commute to work and things. And then video. And video is such a great way of sharing information. We've created a series now of over 1,500 videos. And there's content in there around learning and development, around digital learning, around running virtual classrooms, running webinars. We then teamed up with the FSI after they created a report on the skill gaps within the charity. And so we filmed at their conferences. So there's content that's very charity specific. And we're at the moment, we're creating a digital series and a coaching series. Again, coaching is one of those things that I came up with a phrase. We're actually doing our quarterly members meeting today, virtually, obviously. And I came up with this phrase, coaching, the saviour of L&D, and around, how can we use coaching, within our organisations to increase and make people and help people do their jobs better. So that's another thing. And we use Moodle as a platform. Moodle out of the box is ugly. And so what we've done is we've created a charity version of that. And in terms on the video side, we've created our own video platform. The video platform's free with all of that content for anybody in the charity sector to use. And we started creating some little books. We've done a little book of induction, a little book of virtual classrooms, a little book of webinars. And we're going to continue that, and those are resources that are to help anybody within that L&D space. And what I'll do, I'll just put some links in the chat box so you can you get access to the video platform and you can get access to some of these little books, and we'll be creating more as we go forward. I'll stop. My time's up. Open for question. Any questions in the Q&A session?
Did you have an actual timer there, Martin?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
That's amazing. Right, nobody ever does that. I wish more people would do that. That's good. Right, okay. Excellent. Cool. That was really useful. There's some really good resources actually that have been going into the chat as well. And I think I'll put a link into the white paper that Martin's pulled together. Okay, we're going to hear now, we've got two speakers from Open University in Scotland, so James Mooney and Diane Cooper. So I'm going to hand over to them just now.
Hi everyone, my name is James Mooney. I'm the Manager for Access, Participation and Success at the Open University in Scotland. I actually joined the Open University in Scotland just before the COVID pandemic, having spent previously 20 years at a campus-based university. I'd love to say there was some sort of foresight on my part here, but it was sheer coincidence. So in the intervening months, I've been watching my former colleagues do the online pivot, as it's called, while trying not to be too smug about being ahead of the game with the Open University in Scotland. I'd like to pick up on a couple of things that have been said already, and I will do. Emma, talking about working in partnership, that's absolutely key for us. And also about this idea of online learning just being a replication of what already happens. We're seeing loads of news stories about, rather annoyingly actually, a lot of press about Edinburgh or Glasgow being the first university to go online, and we think, well, hold on a minute. Firstly, we've been here for 50 years. And secondly, going online is not just about recording a lecture. A 50-minute physical lecture was, to be honest, already an outmoded way of learning. And so taking that online, recording it and putting it out there isn't really doing any favors to your students or your end users. I'd like to talk a little bit about a resource that's available to you all, which I've already put into the chat box, and I think those will all be sent on later. And it's called Taking Your Teaching Online. It's a 10-part course, and it takes you through all of the stages. And we've made that available. We, the Open University in Scotland, have made that available free on our Open Learn platform, along with hundreds and hundreds of other courses. So I think that's something that people might find incredibly useful. The second point I'd like to make, picking up on what Emma said, is about working in partnership. And I know my colleague Diane might have more to say on this. But two examples recently where we've worked incredibly effectively in partnership with the third sector have been, firstly, the Everyday Computer Skills course that we put together with Lead Scotland in order to guide people through the process of getting online, right from turning on a computer up to some pretty advanced stuff. And I surprised myself at what I learned through that course as well in a short period of time. We also worked with Who Cares Scotland and the other HEIs in Scotland to produce a resource talking about how we could fulfill our corporate parenting responsibilities and how the sector should address those corporate parenting responsibilities. So working in partnership with those two third sector agencies was absolutely crucial for us, because we accept that we have experience and knowledge in online learning, but they have the experience and knowledge of the end user and of the particular area that they're in. Moving on, and related to the idea of working in partnership, is the issue of working in co-producing resources. And by co-production here, what we really mean is not just working with partners, but ensuring that we bring in the end user, or the learner, or the student, or the client, or however it is that you want to address them. Those are the people who know what they need. And if we don't get them involved right from the very outset, then we could well be producing something which just isn't a good fit in the end. So again, working in partnership with agencies helps us to reach those end users. And at the OU in Scotland, we work with our students right from the very beginning in creating resources. That's useful not just in terms of getting the content right, but also making sure that things are accessible. And we can make sure that the platform that's used is right for them, and they have all the knowledge of that platform and use it to its fullest. And moving on, the next point I'd like to make is about engagement, and I think this has already been picked up. We need to engage, continue to engage with people, not just on whatever learning platform we use, but on the platforms that they're familiar with, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it might be, whatever people are using, that's what they're comfortable with. I find myself hugely annoyed by the use of the term social distancing, especially in the context of the OU in Scotland and what we do. We're physically distancing at the moment. We're not socially distancing. And the great majority of our students, and the great majority of people who might be a little younger than those of us in the room at the moment, that is how they socialize. So we can retain that connection and tackle isolation and enable peer support through the platforms that people are comfortable with. And finally, just to temper things somewhat, realism, especially with relation to timelines for good online resources. I'm sure, as Emma will attest to, this isn't something that happens quickly. And if it does happen quickly, we might need to think about whether you're taking on board all of those things that we need to do to get it right. So we have to be very realistic about the timelines involved and about the cost involved as well. But I've already highlighted a couple of examples where we've worked really effectively with the third sector, and we're always looking for opportunities. I'd like to hand over to my colleague now, Diane, who might be able to fill in a little bit more.
Hi there, I'm Diane Cooper. I'm Partnerships Manager at Open University in Scotland. I may know some of the attendees here today because I came from the third sector. I worked for at Kosovo for a wee while as well, and previously I worked in the housing sector. So it's really good to be here today. Just to give you a bit of an overview, the OU work in partnership with many different types of organisations across obviously the whole of Scotland. Our reach is from the borders right through to Shetland and Orkney. We work with many third sector organisations, SCVO in particular, and Kosovo as a sort of two main sort of bodies that we are connected with. We also work with individual charities and third sector organisations such as Lone Parents Scotland, because we're doing particular projects. We work with employability, FedCap, part of Fair Start Scotland, and we're also exploring opportunities just now with developing leaderships clubs across the whole of Scotland with Kosovo. We do have a sort of centre of volunteer sector leadership within the OU, and we're sort of piloting a couple of projects in Glasgow with the TSI there. So we do sort of work across the whole of the sector in lots of different ways. And like James mentioned, we work with Lead Scotland and Who Cares Scotland as well. So many different connections across. Very open to conversations, very open to people approaching us with ideas about any sort of opportunities that may arise. And I just want to add as well, just briefly, that I'm responsible for the upskilling agenda within the OU in Scotland as well. So I don't know if you have noticed in the past, but we've previously offered free funded modules, free funded micro-credentials on specific courses that may be of benefit to you. There was one for teaching online. We're actually going to be doing another one. So I'll make sure that I, once it's all shaped up, we're actually shaping it up just now, I'll forward all that information so that you can have a wee look and see if that's something that you want to apply for. We receive Scottish Funding Council money on an annual basis to be able to subsidise or support and fund some of the courses. So that was really just a bit of a sort of quick overview. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to pass back to Ross.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Dan. So we've got time now for discussion and for questions. So we'll take some. What we'll do is we'll have a wee scan through the chat box and just pick out some of the ones that we've kind of missed as we're going. And there's one that stood out just going back to Emma's talk. So it was Helen Nelson. Helen, if you're still on the call, do you want to jump on? You can ask the question. It was about digital badges. Are you still about?
Hi, yes, I'm still here.
Hey, there we go.
I've not got my video on because
okay.
it helps, I think, save my my broadband. So otherwise, it's a wee bit unstable. So excellent talks so far this morning. I was interested in what Emma said about digital awards, and so and then moving on to what Diane was saying as well about online teaching, and thinking about continuous professional development credits, if you like, for those of the community here that might need that for to show their continuous professional development. So maybe back to the digital awards first, and could Emma tell us more about that and how that works?
Yeah, for sure. One of the advantages, I suppose, of engagement with the OU is Lead couldn't do that. So if we've got the course hosted on OU, the learner works towards once they finish the course, they can sign up and get a digital badge, if you like. And the OU can talk to it better than I can, but my understanding is that you could probably gain digital badges for other courses and have a bit of a portfolio of different digital badges. We thought it would be great. It's quite motivating to use it as a bridge. You've signed up now for that course, you've done that. What other courses are there I can do? You're already signed up, you're linked in, and you just build build up a wee backpack, if you like, of digital badges. So it's something that's built into that OU platform, which again is one of the advantages of using their expertise. I don't know if I've answered your question fully, but maybe Diane or James could talk up.
Happy to pick that up. Yeah, if you go onto the Open Learn platform and you type in badged open courses, they're called Box in short, actually. And basically we have, I think there's maybe about 50 in total of specific courses that basically, they're 24-hour courses. You can do them over, you know, the space of weeks or months or days. It's totally up to yourself. They're open 24/7, so you can access them through the night or any time of the day. And there's specific courses that have this digital badge associated with them. Now, the digital badge is like a certificate of completion. And just to give you a wee bit, what I've been doing is working with employers in a suite of digital badge courses. We call them the employability courses. So for example, we went up to Michelin in Dundee recently, a tyre factory that was closed, and we upskilled the workforce in all these digital employability badges, so that in effect, that accelerated their opportunity of finding alternative employment, because they had team working or leadership badges in with their CV. In addition to that certificate that you get, you actually get it on a digital presence, so you can put it on your LinkedIn account, or you know, it's sort of digital savvy as well. So it's really useful. They're really popular. It makes you stand out from the crowd if you're looking for employment or if you're recruiting people as well.
That's super, thank you very much. And does the fact you've got a certificate of completion, does that give you a credit toward any National Progression Awards?
No, it doesn't. The Open Learn courses are non-accredited. Okay,
super. But I think that's wonderful that people have a piece of paper to say that they've completed that learning.
Yeah.
So that's great. Thank you for that.
If I could maybe just come in there, we see, as well as being incredibly valuable in and of itself, we see Open Learn as a gateway as well into our qualifications to ensure that people are comfortable, that they can find their level. And we have, again, if you search, I'll put the link in, on Open Learn, we have pathways that we set up. So these pathways will guide you through from informal to formal accredited learning. And I'll pop that in the chat box now.
Super, thank you.
Brilliant, thanks so much. Hope that answered your question, Helen.
Yes, thank you.
There was a question, actually, Helen brought this one, and a couple of other people's actually kind of picked up on this as well. And I think this is probably one that I would put out to all the speakers, which is having a course or some kind of offering is one thing, getting people to know that exists and to come to it is something else. And actually, it'd be interesting for those in the room, I guess, partly from a marketing perspective, how would you get bums on seats for your courses, but also how does that influence the platform you're choosing? And actually, does that audience exist on that platform already? I don't know if anyone wants to pick up on that, because I think it's a really important point that's often missed a lot. Any takers? Martin, do you want, or Emma, do you want to pick this one up?
Yeah, I'm happy to go if you it's sorry, it's that can be a challenge, and we found that some referring organisations have furloughed workers, etc. So our usual referring networks have led to some more new learners, but there's also been some challenges around that. So actually doing something like this and saying, hey, we've got a great course, you know what, go for it, and if we could support your learner through it. So actually we've done quite a lot of this, going in different places to try and advertise our wares, if you like. But sometimes you can scare a learner by saying, guess what, you're going to do a course, because that's not what you do when you go to somebody's house. You go, right, you want to do something, okay, let's tease that out, and before you know it, they're on the course. So in some ways, trying to market to the people we want to support by saying you can do an online course, and they go, oh mommy, there's no way I could do an online course and have no computer. It's not the starting point. So we've had to advertise it in different ways to different audiences. So we've used things like this to try and get staff and volunteers and other organisations. But actually when you're supporting learners directly, it's very much more about, we want a bit of a chat, and we've actually used some old school posters on Facebook and things to try and make it look a bit more person-centred and friendly. So a variety of approaches that we've tried anyway.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a question actually that probably ties in really nicely from that, from Lindsay Patterson, about trying to make sure that people actually attend sessions. Lindsay, do you want to quickly jump on? Ask your question. I did see you in the room, Lindsay. You are somewhere.
I'm still here. We're a charity that support families with autism, and we're doing quite a lot of engagement with parents. And just we're noticing about, online sessions, usually through Zoom, are getting about a 50% uptake of people that have booked on. And just, is that what other people are experiencing? And anybody got any top tips in terms of trying to up that number a wee bit, or should I just adjust my expectations?
Martin, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, rule of thumb, 50% of people who register turn up. We work on that. I was actually thinking of the other question in terms of engaging people, in terms of how do we try and increase that 50% of actual attendees, and we find that it's basic marketing. It's looking at how do you market, whether it's that particular piece of learning or learning services as a whole. And probably find this with some of the bigger charities where they'll actually get their comms teams involved and approach it like a like any other comms thing. So in terms of, okay, so we need to look at over the next 12 months, our comms strategy for learning development as a whole is this. And then when you've got individual events, and then have almost, I could call it a mini campaign, sounds too much, but in terms of once somebody is booked onto the event, then having points leading up to the event that will then gently remind people that it's happening. And also think about what's in it for them, because if somebody's told to go on a training course, they probably won't do it. There has to be a what's in it for them, and what are they going to come out with.
Yeah, brilliant advice. Yeah, there's actually, I guess, a follow-up question from Kevin Ferguson about, does charging for a course increase attendance percentage? And obviously that's going to depend on who your audience is and whether you can charge or not. I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on that one. It doesn't actually have to be one of our speakers. If anyone in the room's got any thoughts on that, have you tried a course where it's been free and then tried the same course and you've actually charged a small fee, and has that changed attendance?
I could comment on that in terms of both organisations and then how we work as an organisation. And we always really struggle with this, because if something is free, the perceived value is zero. And so we have tried charging small amounts of money, but invariably what happens within the charity sector, in the corporate sector it's not an issue because they've got loads of budget. In the charity sector, invariably what happens is that fee is then paid for by the individual, and we just feel that it should be the organisation that should pay it, but they don't have the funds or the resource to that. So in the end, we do everything free, and we just try and encourage people, maybe gently or less gently to attend. And I think it comes back to what's in it for them. So there has to be a reason for them attending. And then if it's paid or not, then if you can get that right, it should boost up the numbers.
Right, that's really good. There's a question actually, Philip had asked a couple of questions, that one that's just come in about learning management systems. And so would you consider using a WordPress learning management system compared to Moodle? I guess, what are the essential features that you want in a learning management system? And I guess there's that bigger question of, do you build something yourselves, or do you use a platform that exists already? I don't know if anyone wants to pick that up. Any thoughts on that, James?
Well, First thing I say is I'm not an expert by any means on online development of courses. I'm very grateful that we have a massive team of people that do that for us on our own VLE and our own platforms. One thing I would urge people to look at is, as well as our Open Learn platform, we have a platform called Open Learn Create, which allows people to develop their own courses using our Open Learn platform. And if anyone wants to have a look at that and feels that they would benefit from any guidance at all, then again, get in touch with us. It's pretty standard, universal, it's accessible as well, so it does provide a good opportunity for people to use existing OU technology.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's really good advice.
Maybe,
yeah, I think, sorry, you go, Beth.
Sorry, Ross, I was just going to come in. For anyone that's quite techie, I've had some interesting chats recently with the SSC, and I think maybe there's somebody's mentioned SSC in the chat. I don't know if we've got somebody here who's from SSC, but they've been looking at a thing called XAPI, which is quite a techie thing. But if people are looking to, so what they're thinking about is how they can record learning across a whole range of platforms. So if somebody's read an article or watched a YouTube video or a TED talk or done something on one of their apps, or perhaps logged into their Moodle and done something, they're collecting the kind of the evidence effectively of that learning through a whole range of different routes into a learner record system. And it's an open data standard that allows you to do that. So it takes a bit of techie stuff. I'm definitely not techie, so which is why I'm describing it in such simple terms. But we're battling with this at SCVO, and we're thinking about, do we have a learner? Do we set up a Moodle? Do we work with Martin? There's lots of things we're exploring just now. And I was quite interested in that idea of actually people are learning across a whole range of different platforms all the time in lots of different ways. So I don't have the answers, but George at the SSC is knowledgeable about this stuff, and I had a really interesting conversation with him about it. So
that's cool. Yeah, there's maybe a blog post brewing in that, Siobhan. I don't know, maybe like kind of 10 ways you can self-serve online learning, or 10 platforms for online learning, giving people that choice. Because I think for a lot of people, they simply don't know these options exist as well. And there's a lot of and some of the hand solutions are actually quite effective. So I think we don't need to overcomplicate things. I think part of that is like what Martin said, is like, just take a PowerPoint and we stick it online, and now that's online learning, is actually understanding that there's a lot more involved in that when you're creating a course from scratch, and not underestimating some of the kind of time and skill set that requires. But that doesn't mean that it's an exclusive thing that you shouldn't take part in and you shouldn't be involved in, even when you're quite a small charity. Beth, John, or Siobhan, any questions in there that stood out for you, or any points from you?
One very quick point I was thinking about in relation to the paid versus free is an obstacle I think charities run into is a lot of platforms let you test for free content, but if you want something that's going to take payment or have something behind a paywall, you're often onto a more expensive version of that platform. And also it's just a more complicated process. Learners can't just go to a link and access content. You've got to think through that process. So that's a bit of a headache. It's not insurmountable, of course, but it does add another layer of complexity. So, and I think often charities are wondering about, on the one hand, they want stuff that's easy for people to discover, but on the other hand, they maybe want to protect it in some way so that people are formally registered.
Yeah, I think that's some really good points there. Beth or Siobhan, anything from you? Any questions you've seen that really stood out?
There was an interesting question from Nadine, who was wondering about information on encouraging the social aspect of working digitally.
That's a really good
so
question.
I don't know if you want to jump in, Nadine. Are you meaning in courses, or the aspects of colleagues or students would have their kind of downtime between classes normally?
Yeah, I was just meaning basically the people that we work with have really struggled socially, more than anyone we've ever known. And I was just wondering if there's any courses or anything that would help us encourage that, and we'd try doing team meetings and stuff like that at 1 o'clock every day, just to get people socializing and speaking to each other, because usually we're in a classroom setting, so they would be there together as a team. But I just wondered if anybody had any information.
That's a really good question. Emma, do you want to come in on that one?
I was just thinking a platform like Slack running alongside might be quite good, and then people can have a bit of a chat. You could also use it to share learning resources, and you can have a private area so people can gather even portfolios of work or whatever. So it could be chat plus the formal learning. The other thing that we learned was we had been reaching out because a lot of people were socially isolated and they were finding it difficult to focus on learning. So we had extended the telephone befriending, but we did a survey and 100% of people said they want us to continue a telephone befriending service. So the other thing you might want to think is, do you have the capacity to have anybody actually contacting people on the one-to-one in between time? So it just kind of props people up a wee bit, I feel like, socially, so that they're maybe feeling more motivated to stick with the other offer you've got. We found those two things running in parallel was quite helpful.
That's really good advice, yeah. Yeah, and I've seen even a really small scale, like smaller charities using things like closed WhatsApp groups to bring people together to kind of share ideas and that peer learning piece. John has to shoot off as well. If you wonder why John's vanished, he's got another call that's happening.
Yeah, James has also just put a link in the chat there for an Open University course, which is actually called Developing a Sense of Belonging in Online Distance Learning.
Perfect.
So ask and the OU provides.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I think for a lot of courses it can feel like quite a lonely place. So like a lonely place because you're going through a process on your own and sitting like 2 hours, basically what Martin's described, in front of a PowerPoint or a glorified PowerPoint, or you sit in a Zoom and it's delivered as a webinar and you've all got to sit and mute and nobody's allowed to speak, and you sit with another PowerPoint while another person speaks. It's not a particularly engaging experience, and there's no sense of community that sits behind it. And I think that's what's missing from a lot of our online learning.
Hi, sorry, could I just, Alan Milson, I'm from Glasgow College, but we work a lot with the voluntary sector, and one of the things we've done in terms of the isolation is we've adapted a lot of our courses that were maybe certificated or a qualification. We've taken elements out that have a much more social element to start with. So for example, we did a qualification that was actually in sewing, but we actually took the qualification away and did the sewing class, which became a much more social class. Our health and relaxation, which was SCQF level 3, we took the qualification element out and we're using the materials on a more social element. And we're finding that that's bringing people back in, and they're probably, gentle introduction, and they're now looking forward to maybe doing something that is a qualification and move forward. So we didn't have to rewrite, but what we did was we chose the elements, because hopefully most of our courses have a social element in them anyway, so we picked out the parts that really focused on that, and we found that quite successful in engaging. And what happened was, in terms of you're talking about engagement, people were then saying to their friends, you should come along to this, it's really good and it's really fun and stuff like that.
That's brilliant. That's really good advice, Alan. Thank you so much for that. There's a really specific request from Paula Fraser that's come in. Paula, do you want to turn on your audio and we can hear from you?
Yeah, so for us, the issue is that we normally work almost exclusively in schools and secure units with young people. So you can imagine at the moment that's very challenging. And obviously we don't have the kind of choice of, what platform are we wanting to use. It's really what are the teachers and schools able to use with us. And that at the moment seems to be Teams, which is fine. And we've got that, but it's really just this challenge of, normally we would be interacting with the pupils together and training them. And now we're trying to come up with a way of doing that through Teams, where sometimes we're not even able to actually see the pupils that we're working with because of what the rules are around it in the school. So it's really just kind of how do we translate our training onto this platform. I don't know if there's any advice on that.
Yeah, any advice or tips for people in the room?
One to get, literally just a suggestion, maybe a really stupid thing, but it might be to get the people who are in that situation to try and come up with what they think the solution is. Maybe it's like, get the pupils, what is it we can do? We've got, these are the limits. It's almost a project, isn't it? This is the limits. How do we do it? And then so doing the actual finding a solution, maybe the part of the learning experience itself, because it's very difficult to get into the head of getting some free consultant to say, well, what's the solution for this? And they might, having experienced it, want to think how they can stretch it and flex it. I know that's not quite the answer maybe you're looking for.
No, that's a really good point. I mean, I did a sort of scoping exercise with the teachers, but we've always got that kind of intermediary kind of problem, you know, of kind of getting access to the pupils. But I think that's a really good point, and perhaps with the context that we've got good relationships with, we'd be able to get them to sort of get, you know, find out from the pupils if we're able to sort of do a survey or some sort of.
Yeah, I think, I mean, one of the things I would suggest, like just echoing what Emma said, is like, because there's a danger with surveys that you're asking people to comment on things that they've maybe never experienced before, and actually is maybe forcing yourself for the next 4 sessions that you use a third-party tool with every session, but it's a different one every time. So you use like maybe like Miro, or you use a Google Jamboard, or something completely off tangent like Trello, because you're going to plan out a session with pupils, and trying to almost kind of force yourself to use a different tool every time, and then look at the end of those 4 sessions, like which tool really struck a chord with the young people and which one worked best. And then even just like how you bring in different techniques, so things like icebreakers, which seem really obvious, but you know, things like Siobhan asking, where is everyone from? And it's just such a simple thing, but a lot of sessions just start going, you're about to hear from a speaker, here's the speaker, and it's almost like you're completely secondary. All you are is just a face on a screen. And so how would you build in that sense of community without everyone having to come and speak on video chat? And you can't logistically do that for a lot of reasons, particularly when you're working with young people, but how do you build that in and throughout the process? But just to try it in different ways, because there's like, we've done stuff, you know, the call we had with Beth Cantor, and so things like a lot of the stuff that's based around mindfulness that you can build into the session, so like pausing for a minute, or there's all sorts of ones that I've read about, like making everyone go and get a hot drink, and then you all hold the hot drink at a set point in time. Like, I'm from Fife, I'm not massively comfortable with that. Like, that doesn't work with me. But like for lots of people, that'll be a really nice thing and it'll be lovely. But you won't know until you try it. Angela's got her hot drink. There we go. That's good. Excellent. I have a hot drink. I just don't want to share the experience with all of you. I'm not ready for that yet. Right. Any other questions that are coming in?
Sorry, thank you very much.
No worries, Paul. Thank you. Nadine's put a really interesting one. We do an exercise which is a speed dating without the romance. There's a series of questions to ask people in pairs or small groups. Nadine, do you want to quickly tell us about that one? That's really interesting.
Yeah, we just do it as icebreakers in our first 2 weeks of our 12-week course. Stick people in pairs or small groups depending on your numbers, and it's just a random questions like, if you had a superpower, what would it be? What's your favourite memory in your childhood, and certain things like that. And then the person reads the answers of the questions for the other person, and it breaks the ice really well.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's really good. I'm going to put some links in. There's a really good one. It's actually from Beth Cantor, but about icebreakers. I think Siobhan's blog post, you correct me if I'm wrong, Siobhan, maybe actually links to this one from Beth as well. But there's some really good ideas. You've put it in already. Sorry, I'm like really far behind here. Sorry.
I couldn't remember if my blog post did, so I just went and got Beth's blog post from the horse's mouth.
It's in there twice.
A blog post I have just written is about Sage Scotland, who work with women who've experienced domestic abuse and the benefits they've seen of taking their group work online. And one of their icebreakers that actually works way better online than it did offline is just to get everyone to change their screen name to a kind of empowering descriptive name. So they've now got like a screen full of like marvelous and storm and things like that, and it's been like really empowering, not just for the person saying their own name there, but for the whole group saying those names. So that might work quite well with teens if you can get them to keep it clean.
Cool. Right, Susie White, do you want to jump in? I'm really interested. Online origami, true and false cards. I want to hear about these. Where are you?
Hi. Hello everyone. We are a national mentoring programme in tandem for young people 8 to 14, so very much empathise with Paula's struggles. We're community-based, not school-based, but very much trying to convert our offline face-to-face material into stuff that works online. And some of the stuff we've used is, you know, everyone's got a piece of paper, it's fairly accessible. Everyone's going to make an online origami, holding up true and false cards for questions, so that it's a bit more physically interactive, especially for restless children that don't want to just sit and listen. So polls within your Teams or your Zoom calls as well. So those are the sort of things that our coordinators are trying to do with young people, keep them engaged
really cool.
in the learning session, so that it's not just a delivery of slides.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you, Susie. Thanks for sharing that. There's a couple of questions actually coming just now about numbers, which I think is really an interesting one, about optimum numbers. I don't know if anyone's got any feelings on that, and obviously it depends on the type of session, but if anyone's either done any research or got any strong feelings on, for this type of session, this is the optimum amount of people based on your experience. Any thoughts on that, Emma, Martin, or James? Or?
Yeah, I was having a wee think about that actually. We agreed with our staff team we would do kind of 4 to 6. And actually that's, I know it seems really small and it's resource intensive, but I guess when you're offering 1-to-1, 4 to 6 is like a massive big group experience.
Yeah.
So that tends to be what roughly the numbers that we do, unless we're doing something where it's a bit more one way, a bit more like this, an input with a Q&A, and then you know we've maybe had 20, but we tend to do it fairly small scale.
Right. Martin, you were going to come in on that one as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that if it's a virtual classroom type environment, then 10 to 12 people. If it's more discussion based like this, making sure that everybody's on video and bringing people into the conversation, I'd say you can get up to about 20 people. We've done something that we call a virtual coffee morning, and we had, I think, 40, and that was too many because you couldn't bring everybody into the conversation.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, and there's, I mean, I think one of the things is for those of you in the room is to try it out and see what's going to work. So, you know, these calls have pretty sizable numbers on them. Sometimes it's been into the hundreds of people, but depending on what you're trying to do, those numbers wouldn't be appropriate. So the other thing to think about is if you limit numbers, you might just run the same session over multiple times on multiple dates, rather than thinking it's just a one-off thing that happens at a single fixed point in time. So just, I mean, that sounds really obvious, but just giving some thoughts to the logistics around it. Okay, any other questions that you've noticed, Beth, that have come in? Any other points?
Yeah, I think we've covered off quite a lot of them. I've been trying to keep, because there's been so much chat, it's been brilliant trying to sort of see if there's anything from the early on, but I think we've picked up the majority of the themes. I don't know if there's anybody on the call that wants to jump on, if there's anything from earlier on that we haven't quite got to.
Any questions? You can either raise your hand or just unmute and go for it. This is where like 80 people unmute at the same time. That'll be a first. Okay. Any other questions from people?
I think it's maybe useful to reflect not just on this online pivot for learners or clients, but how we use it in our organizations as well, and the impact it has on staff. Because I think there's a lot to learn from that. We find in the Open University, which is of course a 4 nations university, that actually going online is incredibly democratizing. In the past, we might have found ourselves, being the OU in Scotland, being the only people on Skype, speaking to a physical room of people down in Milton Keynes. But given that everyone is sort of in the same situation at the moment of being online, we're actually finding that's got huge benefits for people speaking up, where they might not have felt comfortable doing that in a physical situation. So I think it's worth highlighting the opportunities and the benefits, as well as the challenges as well that come from this. Yeah,
Emma, do you want to come in on that as well? Thanks for that, James.
No, just building on that actually, you can be more inclusive and accessible online. And you know, as long as somebody has the kit and has adaptive software and has the support to learn how to use it, actually it can open up worlds as well. So in some ways, yes, we'll be moving back to a blended learning model, because we can know that we can reach more people. The challenge has been that the people we're supporting have been the wrong side of the digital divide. But with so many initiatives getting kit and support to people, we've got a really good opportunity to be more inclusive and accessible.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point actually. And it's been mindful of digital inclusion, but it's also been mindful of the fact that when you used to run things exclusively in a physical space, that actually how many people were excluding via that model as well. So we're always thinking about accessibility, whether it's online or whether it's face-to-face. It's not going to go away. There's a really good question actually that came in about presenter fatigue. So this is more or less thinking about the learner and actually thinking about you as the people in this room who might be running some of this training. I'm trying to remember who asked it.
That was Lindsay Patterson.
Lindsay, you about? Do you want to come in?
Yeah, hi. I think probably it's about learning, and learning something new as well. But definitely all the people that have been presenting in our organisation have just found it really draining in terms of presenting, and actually it's making me think maybe we're presenting in the wrong way, and actually maybe we need to up the engagement and feedback from the learners. I just wondered if anybody else had been experiencing that, and if anybody else had any top tips in trying to do that. I think when you're very used to presenting in the room and getting feedback from people quite instantly, it's really hard to adapt, and it feels a little bit like you're talking and stuff and you have no idea where it's landing. So yeah, just if there was a bit of discussion around that, would be great.
Okay. Any speakers want to come on that? Beth, you were going to come on quickly, and then maybe Martin.
No, I was just going to say, just the number of heads nodding when you said that, Lindsay, was, I think, sort of shows at that point it's really valid. I was going to say from personal experience, I've done a few webinars that are webinar format, where you're just talking at a webcam, and you exactly that point, you really don't know where it's landing or how people are finding it. So I think that your thing about the more engagement, you know, that you're energized as a presenter or trainer facilitator when you get feedback and when people respond to you. So it means fewer numbers probably, but I think it's a much more energizing experience.
Yeah. I mean, just on a practical point of view, Martin's going to come in a second. I just think if you're trying to build community and it's about a shared learning experience, webinar formats are not very good for doing that. They just don't work very well. If what you're doing is trying to capture a bit of content that's a piece of long tail content that will sit on a YouTube channel, and actually the 15 people who attend are a secondary audience, then it's great, because the thing you're going to capture is going to look really nice. It's going to look better than the tiny screens on this, but actually, you know, when we hold this, it's for you as people in this room, the here and now, and our secondary audience is the people who watch it afterwards on YouTube. So again, it's just thinking about who's the audience and what's that purpose. But I totally agree, like when you're looking at a slide deck and you know that there's 25 people also looking at it, and you have no idea how they're responding or what they're doing, it's not a very nice experience. Martin, sorry, you're going to come in. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that no, choose the right platform and engage with people. The great thing about the DigiShift series is, you know, this is almost like a training session on how to use technology. And I've been on loads of webinars during COVID where, you know, after about 10 minutes, you just completely turn off. And you know, having the video is great, but if you can't have video, I find that the chat box works really, really well. And if you imagine that you're in a classroom environment, you're going to get people who won't engage anyway. When you then go onto a Zoom environment and everybody's on video, and I say, you know, can I have a volunteer to talk about X, Y, Z? Then, you know, you get the same situations you get in the classroom where people look at the floor and they don't want to stand up and talk. And so what we tend to do is we direct people to the chat box, because everybody is comfortable with, you know, with putting something in the chat box. So if I ask you a question now and say, you know, who will volunteer and speak, then, you know, I might struggle to get people to speak. But if I say, can everybody put everybody type your favorite biscuit in the chat box, you know, I'll give you 30 seconds to do it. I can guarantee that, you know, I'll get 60 or 70% of people that will then actually come and engage. And so from a presenter, I can then bounce off what I'm getting from the audience. So I do get, we're calling it Zoom fatigue. The other thing is the fact that we're just spending so much time now looking at the same screen with, you know, I've got the same pictures above me and everything's around me, that my brain is not being stimulated in the same way as it is normally when I'm going out and meeting people face to face. So what's your favourite biscuit? It's always a favourite.
Yeah.
Keep it fun and keep it real, keep it human.
I don't know why people who like hobnobs all write in capital letters, but that seems to be a recurring theme. Who knows? It's weird, but anyway. That's some really good tips, Martin. Some really good advice. I think the chat box is so underused, and it's such an obvious thing. It's just sitting there, and it's really, really underused. But it's just a simple technique. What I have found is using third-party tools, so things like Miro or Jamboard or Trello or just a simple open Google Doc. They're good, but it's an easy way to lose certain people very, very quickly. And so some people, it works really well, and it's like, it's the difference between something just being talked at and them feeling like they're part of it and they're collaborating. For a lot of other people, it's like, it's an initial terrifying thing, and it's a really big turn off for them. So you need to try this with like these different approaches with different types of learners and figure out what's going to work for them. There's no simple kind of like, here is the one platform that's going to work. Miro in particular, like, so on the face of it, in many ways it's the best because it has so much functionality and it's amazing. in terms of what you can do and how you can structure it. The problem is someone can spend 7 minutes resizing a post-it note, and it's actually trying to do it when you've only got 60 minutes to deliver a session. It's like you've lost people completely. So the thing I would say is start with utter simplicity and then build up to something that's a bit more complicated. Okay, we've still got a wee bit of time. What would probably be useful actually is if there's one piece of advice from each of the speakers, and it can be about choosing platform, it can be about techniques, anything at all. What's your one parting piece of advice for people in the room? So who wants to go first? I totally put you in the spot. I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but right, Martin, you go first.
I'll have a go because I'm not muted. Think about the solution, or in fact, no, work out what the actual problem is that you're trying to solve. Learning and development, and something that we're very hot on. I'll find some videos. There's a great one which is about learning and development needs to be more like engineers and less like shopkeepers. We need to stop just saying, here's a solution. We need to say, what's the problem? And then find out what it is that you're trying to achieve, and then find the right mix of online and stand up. Yeah, totally. Like, yeah, cannot emphasize that enough. So focusing on the why, not the how. Like, just for me, this whole experience of online learning allows you to get back to the basics. You're not constrained by a classroom setting because that's the building you happen to be in. You can do whatever you want now, and that's really liberating, but it's also kind of terrifying at the same time. One of the big things, so going back to that marketing point that we spoke about before, is what I've seen from a lot of charities trying to do online learning or workshops or whatever you want to call it. There's not a sense of what is the value for me as a learner. So there's a sense of, I've been given money from the Big Lottery Fund, National Lottery Community Fund, actually, sorry, whatever they're called now. And I'm going to deliver a thing to you because this is a thing that I've got, it's a project, or it's a thing that someone's given money for. And when I look at the description of it, there's nothing in there that says to me why I should bother turning up as a learner. So what's the thing that I'm going to get that adds value? And just as a simple premise, keeping that in mind when you're talking about your courses, is like you're irrelevant. Your internal structures and your funding are totally irrelevant to that learner. It's all about what they're going to get from it. Emma, what's your top tip?
For me, I guess it's meet the learner at their starting point and offer them a flexible experience. One of the things that I get quite excited about is if something feels intuitive, when I'm doing it, and I think, oh great, and you build on it. If you start where the person is and you can offer them that experience, then they're more likely to be able to expand the horizon and try new things. But if you're able to flex your approach to tailor to what the learner starting point is, and then that, for me, that's absolutely golden, and it's the way you'll reach people who are more likely to not get involved, and that's why that's important, I think.
Brilliant, that's really good advice, thank you, Emma. James, any thoughts?
Similarly to Emma, I'd say start with the end user. Be realistic about your deadlines in terms of development time, and speak to OU in Scotland, because we're here to help.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really useful. Yeah, it's really useful to know that people can partner up with other organisations. You're not on your own. You're not doing this stuff from scratch. And learning from each other as well. So if you've seen an organisation doing amazing stuff with online learning, just reach out to them and ask them. Too much of this stuff we're seeing is just like someone sitting with a completely blank slate and starting from scratch. It's like, where do you take those building blocks of what's working from elsewhere, and how do you implement that? Okay, right. Emma, go for it.
One of the things that was really important when we did with the OU course, with the learners, that the feedback was brilliant. Now we've designed it, I can actually do it if that's the course I wanted to do. And also there's something really powerful, isn't there, about involving people in creating the product you've got. And then how proud they can feel when you show a link and say, see that course, by the way, I was involved in writing that. And I think that's really powerful as well. So it's not just a useful thing to do from a marketing perspective, it really builds pride in communities as well.
Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're gonna finish up there. So huge thank you to Emma, Martin, James and Dan as well. Really, really amazing speakers. We're going to get some of the links will come out as well. Today's session will go up on the CDO YouTube account. The future DigiShift calls, you'll get them. So if you go on the CDO events page, you'll see all upcoming DigiShift calls. There's some other interesting actually online events that SCBO are doing at the moment as well. Our free training, which we run through Third Sector Labs, if you go on the Third Sector Lab website, thirdsectorlab.co.uk, and click the training tab, we've got training sessions coming up in September and October. So we've got one on online facilitation skills, we've got one on digital strategy, we've got one on human-centered design, and a few other ones coming up. I think Siobhan has just put links in there. There we go. Huge thank you. Siobhan, any final thoughts from you or any other SCBO things we need to highlight?
Just really to highlight one of your own courses that you've just mentioned there. So that really ties in with what Emma's just been talking about. So that's human-centered design. So it's going to be Jess Gilner really talking about the tools to kind of discover and design how you can start designing for your users and having them right at the center of your whole design process. So that's at the end of the month, but I've popped all the links into the chat. And yeah, there's more DigiShifts coming up. The next one will be especially useful. So that's looking at the key digital tools that we think that every charity should have in their box right now. So if you don't have them, kind of look to develop your strategy to build them into your working processes in the next few months. So that's coming up, and I've put the link for that into the chat as well.
Brilliant,
we'd love to have, just to add to that, what Siobhan was saying, for that one about the 15 things, we'd love to have as many of you there as possible, because it's our sort of chance to take stock a wee bit on all of the great work that's happened since the start of the crisis. So we did some work a couple of years ago and had this list of here's the 15 key things that from all of our work we think are the ones that charities should be working on. And those have changed because so many organisations have done so much stuff during the crisis. So we really need as much input as we can to work out actually where are organisations just now and what's the next bit of the programme of work to support organisations with what they need next. So if you can make it, please do. If you can't, please get someone from your organisation to come along, because we need as much input as we can at that one.
Yeah, and once that new one is published, what we found a lot is with the previous one, it's a really good like one-page, I guess, starter for 10 for your board or senior management teams to think about this stuff, and it's based on what has worked with hundreds of charities. So you're not going to them saying, I have this idea, and they think, oh, that sounds very weird, maybe that would work, I don't know, what is she talking about? But actually this is based on substantial learning from a whole range of organisations, and it's basically a roadmap on one page of what you can do next based on experience. So yeah, so the more we can get input from that, the better, but also, yeah, it's just a really simple tool that you'll have at the end of it. Cool, okay. And there's a final parting one from Rob Campbell that nicely sums up. He's saying, love that, learned loads. James Mooney's quote of we're physically distancing, but not socially is going to get borrowed. So that's, yeah, I thought it was quite useful as well. Great, thank you very much for coming along. The recording will be on the YouTube channel for SCBO, and you can come along to our other DigiShifts on the SCBO events page. Go and get some lunch and enjoy the rest of your sunny day. I hope it's sunny right now. See you all later. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, James. Thanks, Martin.